Welcome back guys to part 2 of the Horus Heresy. In the last video we talked briefly about the beginning of the heresy, how Horus was corrupted, the Isstvan 3 atrocity, the Isstvan 5 drop site massacre, the Shadow Crusade, and today we'll continue with the fate of the remaining legions, the siege of Terra, Horus and the Emperor face to face, and what happened after the heresy. So let's dive right in. Horus and Sanguinius, the Primarch of the Blood Angels Legion, had fought many campaigns by each other's side. Their relationship was so close, it had even incited jealousy amongst their brother Primarchs on occasion. But in his black heart, Horus knew that Sanguinius would never willingly betray their father, and so he put up a plan to convert the Blood Angels to his cause or utterly destroy them. Decades earlier, Horus had discovered a genetic flaw in Sanguinius' genome that would later be known as the Red Thirst. Horus ordered the Blood Angels to cleanse the Signus cluster of Xenos invaders, and he informed Sanguinius that he had found the means to rid themselves of the genetic flaw if Sanguinius obeyed the War Master's command on this matter. Sanguinius willingly obeyed his brother Primarch and immediately set out for the Signus cluster, not knowing that it was infested by chaos agents and demons. When the Blood Angels arrived in system, the fleet was ambushed by forces of the warp. The Blood Angels now faced the fury of chaos for the first time, and they attacked the demon host of Kyries. During the epic battle, Sanguinius came face to face with a greater demon of Khorne, known as Ka'Bandha. Sanguinius witnessed Ka'Bandha slaughter 500 of his sons with huge swaths of his mighty axe. The psychic backlash of the death of so many of his sons blasted Sanguinius into unconsciousness. With the fall of their Primarch and the slaughtering of their brethren, the Blood Angels were consumed by a black rage that drove them into a berserker's fury, and in their madness they smashed the horde of demons. The brutal violence of the demon Ka'Bandha had unleashed something dark within the psyche of the Space Marines, a thirst for blood that would not be slaked until every taint of chaos had been erased from the planet. Even the mighty Kyries was banished back to the Immaterium. Only when the planet was cleansed did the rage of the Blood Angels finally subside. The berserker's rage the Blood Angels had experienced had left a brooding shadow on their souls that would manifest in the centuries to come as the Great Curse, later known as the Black Rage. Bertrabo's Iron Warriors took the time to humble the great enemies, the Imperial Fists. Upon the isolated world of Hydra Cordatus that the Sons of Dawn had recently brought into Imperial compliance, the Iron Warriors made planetfall and made for the planet's lone formidable fortress, known as the Cadmean Citadel. Within the castle was a small garrison of Imperial Fists that Rogal Dawn had left behind. The technological cunning of the ancient fortress builders and the courage of the defenders proceeded to keep the Iron Warriors at bay for almost 3 months. But when the Iron Warriors finally overcame the Citadel's ancient defenses and broke open its walls, they slaughtered the remaining Imperial Fists and the heroic men and women of Hydra Cordatus that had chosen to stand with them. Following the Iron Warriors' victory on the world of Hydra Cordatus, word reached the Lord of Iron that Fulgrim, Primarch of the Emperor's children, wished to rendezvous with him to discuss something of great import. Bertrabo believed Fulgrim's visit had something to do with Mars. The War Master needed the Martian theater fully secured before they moved against Terra, and he believed that Fulgrim was there to seek the Iron Warriors' aid in breaking open the forged cities of the Mechanicum. Unannounced, on the surface of Hydra Cordatus, over 300 drop crafts had landed beyond the mouth of the valley where the Iron Warriors had made their encampment. And then Fulgrim came with an offer to unite their mutual forces in battle on a glorious quest. They were to venture to the warp storm that had plagued Bertrabo's dreams all of his life. Within it was hidden an ancient and forbidden Xenos weapon known as the Angel Exterminatus. For as long as he remembered, Bertrabo was always aware of the Eye of Terror's presence and could perceive an echo of it on every world where he had looked to the heavens. He did not know whether this warp sight had been engineered into his perceptive apparatus deliberately, like Sanguinius' wings or Corax's eyes, or was simply a quirk of his genetic code. Unknown to both the Iron Warriors and the Emperor's children, they were being pursued by a ragtag group of loyalist Astartes who were survivors of the drop site massacre of Isstvan 5. These loyalist space marines consisted of Iron Hands Astartes, surviving warriors of the Salamanders, and a single Raven Guard Astartes aided by a mysterious Elder Guide, with the intention of sabotaging the traitor's plans to acquire the unknown Xenos weapon. The destination of the joint fleet of Iron Warriors and Emperor's children was the lost Elder World of Idris, a world said to have been favored by the goddess Lilith. Idris was one of the legendary Crone Worlds, which once formed the heart of the lost Elder Empire before they were consumed by the creation of the vast warp rift that was the Eye of Terra following the birth of the Chaos God Slaanesh. The lost world was located at the heart of the Eye of Terra. Their ultimate goal is now within the Primarch's grasp. Flocks of Thunderhawks, Stormbirds, Warhawks, and heavy planetary landers were launched as two titans of the Legio Mortis took to the field, along with auxiliary Imperial army forces. Battle of Idris. The Iron Warriors had come in force, and the Emperor's children no less so. Like Bertrabo, Fulgrim rode at the head of his army. As the column of traitors pressed onwards, they were being silently and unknowingly observed by the loyalist Astartes trailing them. As the two Primarchs neared their ultimate goal, the power at the heart of Idris spasmed in hateful recognition of the followers of Slaanesh, known to the Elder as She Who Thirsts, and awoke its guardians from their slumber. Thousands of crystalline statues threw off their previous immobility. This army of wraiths were the Elder dead of Idris. Fulgrim slipped away in the midst of the fighting. Realizing where he had gone, Bertrabo followed Fulgrim and confronted his brother, realizing that there was never an angel Exterminatus. Fulgrim confirmed for Bertrabo that there was no such weapon yet, for he was to be the angel Exterminatus. And amused at Fulgrim's explanation, Bertrabo took a step towards his brother, Forge Breaker in his hand, intent on killing him. Fulgrim spoke a single word. Its nightmare syllables tore at Bertrabo's brain, causing him to stumble and drop to one knee. When Fulgrim had arrived on Hydra Cordatus, he had presented the Lord of Iron with a gift, the Mujita stone, known as the Harvester, which had slowly been draining Bertrabo's strength and life force. With the Lord of Iron's sacrifice, Fulgrim would finally be able to achieve Apotheosis. Apotheosis of Fulgrim. Fulgrim hurled his brother aside. The Lord of Iron lay unmoving, his body broken and lifeless. Fulgrim's armor was shimmering with vitality, as though the light of 1,000 suns were contained within him and strained to break free. In this moment, Bertrabo had regained enough of his former strength and rose to his feet, the Mujita stone in his hand. Bertrabo walked towards Fulgrim and knew that Fulgrim no longer wanted to be an angel, he wanted to be a god. Disgusted by Fulgrim's desires, Bertrabo hurled the Mujita stone into the deep shaft. Suddenly, a barrage of bolt of fire erupted. Black armored space marines charged towards the traitors. It was the Astartes of the 10th Legion, the Iron Hands. During the battle, one of the loyalist Astartes, the lone Raven Guard, had acquired the fallen Mujita stone. He aimed the muzzle of a pulsar at the stone and pulled the trigger. Suddenly, Bertrabo was renewed with the sudden release of his life force from the stone. As the Lord of Iron finally pushed himself upright, he lifted Forgebreaker onto his shoulder. Fulgrim saw his death in Bertrabo's eyes and grinned. Bertrabo hefted Forgebreaker like a headsman at an execution and swung the mighty hammer in a wide arc, splitting Fulgrim's body wide open. Fulgrim's body exploded under the impact of Bertrabo's warhammer. Bertrabo had destroyed Fulgrim's mortal shell. Two obsidian horns erupted from Fulgrim's brow, curling back over his skull, leaving his perfect face as unsullied as the most innocent child. Fulgrim ascended into chaos, a prince of the Neverborn, a lord of the ruinous powers, the chosen and beloved champion of Slaanesh. As the newborn demon prince departed, the first of the traitor primarchs to achieve demonic apotheosis, he left his brother with a cryptic message that one day they would meet again. The ultimate aim of the traitor legion's advance soon became clear. Their goal was the conquest of Terra, the heart of the Imperium. With this conquest, Horus could fulfill his promise to the Chaos Gods and threw down the Emperor of Mankind, their greatest enemy. The sons of Horus, the Death God, the Emperor's children, the World Eaters, and elements of the Word Bearers prepared to rendezvous at Mars. The rest of the Word Bearers Legion was tasked with destroying Rebirth Guilliman and his Ultramarines on the world of Calth. The Imperial Fists Primarch Rogaldorn and the Regent of the Imperium Malcador The Sigillite became aware of the full implications of their position and the strength of Horus and the traitor forces. Dawn immediately recalled all loyalist Imperial forces back to Terra in preparation for the invasion. Of the Space Marine legions still loyal to the Emperor, the Space Wolves had just completed the burning of Prosper, the Thousand Suns traitor legion's homeworld, where the White Scars were stationed. Without warning, the Alpha Legion's fleet broke from the warp and engaged the Space Wolves, hammering their smaller fleet and forcing Leman Russ to resort to hit-and-run attacks. The Alpha Legion's Primarch Alpharius also attacked the nearby forces of the White Scars to draw the larger Astartes Legion into conflict. The White Scars Primarch Jagatai Khan wished desperately to aid Russ, yet as the traitor legion's starships attacked, he received the order from Rogaldorn to bring his legion back to Terra immediately. Dawn also commanded him to relay the order to Russ, and add that should he succeed in evading his attackers, only then should he attempt to head for Terra. Relaying the message and adding his apology for his inability to aid the Space Wolves, the White Scars made for Terra. Russ resolved to meet the Alpha Legion with renewed determination. The Space Wolves would eventually turn the tables on their attackers and make the warp jump to Terra, well after the siege on the Imperial Palace had begun. The Night Lords arrived in the eastern fringe of the galaxy to engage the Dark Angels, and the Iron Warriors Armada broke from the warp to engage the Imperial Fists fleet stationed near the Traitor Legion's headquarters world of Isstvan 5. Surviving the initial thrust of the Iron Warriors' attacks, the Imperial Fists Armada held fast and scattered Bertrabo's fleet, then made their own warp jump to Terra in a desperate race against time. Meanwhile, in the Cygnus cluster, the Blood Angels had triumphed, smashed the hordes of the Chaos Demons, and made the warp jump to Terra. As Horus was heading towards Terra, he received a communication from the Thousand Suns Primarch Magnus the Red that they were en route to Terra, where they would link up with Horus's forces. Of the 9 remaining loyalist Space Marine legions, only the White Scars and the Blood Angels were able to join Rogaldorn and his Imperial Fists in the defense of Terra before the arrival of the traitor legions in the solar system. 3 entire Titan legions of the Adeptus Mechanicus and close to 2 million soldiers of the Imperial army stood alongside them to face the traitors in a battle that would determine the fate of mankind for 10,000 years. Situation of the legions before the siege of Terra. 9 turned traitor, and the other 9 are still loyal to the Emperor. The loyals are Lionel Johnson's Dark Angels, Jagatai Khan's White Scars, Leman Russ's Space Wolves, Rogaldorn's Imperial Fists, Sanguinius' Blood Angels, Ferrus Maneth's Iron Hands, Rebirth Guilliman's Ultramarines, Vulcan's Salamanders, Corvus Corax's Raven Guard. And the other 9 traitors, Fulgrim's Imperial Children, Bertrabo's Iron Warriors, Conrad Kerr's Night Lords, Angron's World Eaters, Mortarian's Death Guard, Magnus the Red Thousand Suns, Horus's Lunar Wolves, Loga's Word Bearers, and the Alpha Legion of Alpharius. Now for the siege of Terra. It began with an orbital bombardment by Horus's fleet. After several days, the Chaos Space Marines landed on the surface of Terra in drop pods and advanced on the 2 spaceports closest to the location of the Imperial Palace to secure them and prepare for the main landing of their forces. Despite the brave efforts of the Loyalists, the Eternity War and the Lion's Gate spaceports fell within hours to the forces of Chaos. Then Dark Chaos cultists started calling down the greater demons of Chaos from the warp. With the spaceports secured, Horus's remaining troops of the traitor legions and the traitor imperial army and Dark Mechanicus support forces landed en masse. Along with the traitor titans that had been infected with the demonic power of chaos, the transport's immense size made them the main targets for Terra's defense lasers. Although many of them were destroyed in atmosphere, many more made it to the surface. They met stiff resistance from the loyalists, for they knew that the future of the entire human race rested on their shoulders. The Chaos Besiegers forced the Imperial defenders back to the walls of the Imperial Palace. The Primarch Angron of the World Eaters, now a demon prince of the Blood God Khorne, came forth before the walls of the palace and demanded the loyalists surrender, saying that they were cut off, outnumbered. Just then arrived Sanguinius. The two Primarchs gazed at each other. Eventually Angron withdrew and told his forces that there would be no surrender. The forces of chaos scaled the walls of the Imperial Palace 3 times and were pushed back by Sanguinius and his Blood Angels. Horus then ordered the Legio Mortis, the Death's Head Legion, to demolish entire sections of the wall, which they did, and the traitors flooded through. Seeing this, Jagatai Khan decided on a change of plan. Instead of assaulting the almost invincible flanks of the chaotic army, Khan redirected his highly mobile White Scars Space Marines to Lion's Gate spaceport. The raid caught the traitor garrison at the spaceport completely by surprise and reclaimed the spaceport. Then Khan ordered his troops to reactivate the spaceport's defense lasers to prevent the traitor fleet from bringing down any more troops and to form a defensive perimeter to hold the spaceport. Inspired by his success, the Loyalists also tried to seize back the Eternity Wall spaceport, but were driven back by the Chaos forces without difficulty, as they had reinforced their garrison following the loss of the Lion's Gate. Inside the palace, the defenders had been forced back to the Eternity Gate, the only point of entry into the inner sanctum of the Imperial Palace. The Astartes of the Blood Angels and Imperial Fists tried to hold back the attackers, while the remaining loyalists made it through the gate. Soon the mighty bloodthirster Greater Demon Kabanda came forth and pealed out a challenge to Sanguinius in the name of his master Khorne. The demon hurled itself at the Angel of Baal, barely allowing him time to parry the demon's strikes. The two took to the air, trading blows and battle cries high above the heads of the two forces. Already fatigued from the long siege, Sanguinius was cast down by the demon. But Sanguinius was not beaten. He cleared his head, forced himself back to his feet, and once again took to the skies. The angel seized the gloating demon, holding it by the right ankle and arm, left the creature high and broke its back over his knee, and threw the demon's carcass back at the besiegers. Of course, as a demon, Kabanda could not truly be slain, only banished to the warp for 1,000 years or so. Meantime, the Emperor ordered Malcador the Sigillite to summon 12 individuals who would be tested and trained to become the elite group of investigators intended to root out treachery across the Imperium, to prevent any event like the Horus Heresy from occurring again. And so the Inquisition was created. The warp gate the Emperor had constructed deep beneath the Imperial Palace required constant maintenance. At first, this demanded only a small portion of the Emperor's psychic might, and so he was able to command his armies. But the Chaos Gods manipulated Magnus the Red to send powerful psychic sorcery against the protective psychic shield of the Webway. If the Webway is destroyed, this would open a permanent doorway between Terra and the warp, flooding Terra with the demonic legions of the ruinous powers. So the Emperor concentrated all of his psychic power and mental concentration to defend the Webway. The Emperor told Malcador that he had to take the Emperor's place on the psychic amplifier known as the Golden Throne, which provided the psychic sheath needed to protect the new human-built sections of the Webway intended to be the Emperor's final gift to humanity before the Horus Heresy had begun. The Emperor's original choice of his replacement on the artifact had been the Primarch Magnus the Red, but since Magnus and his 1,000 Sons Space Marine Legion had sided with Horus and the Chaos God Tzeentch, Malcador was now his only chosen successor and the only remaining Psyker with enough strength to carry out the duty. The Sigillite was more than willing to sacrifice himself for his Emperor, But before he ascended to take his place upon the throne, he was accompanied by a group of 12 hooded attendants. The Emperor surveyed the robed figures, and he saw that his faithful servant had done well. Of the 12, 4 were mortal lords and administrators of the Imperium, possessed of an inquisitive nature and unyielding strength of mind. The other 8 were space marines whose abilities were as peerless as their dedication to the Emperor. Some hailed from legions that had abandoned the Emperor's light in favor of Horus's dark promises, but these battle brothers had never lost their loyalty and had fought their heresy from within. Fulsome in his approval of the selection, Malcador The Sigillite ascended to the gold throne, replacing the Emperor who now stood before his loyal captains Rogaldon and Sanguinius. Malcador could not speak. Such was the concentration he had to bring to bear in order to control the forces at his call. The Emperor directed the attention of the 2 mighty Primarchs. Behold the greatest sacrifice of our age. Malcador the Sigillite is no more. Henceforth he shall always and only ever be Malcador the hero. At this, the 3 figures retired from the Imperial Palace's vault and made ready to teleport into the battle barge of Horus. The task of keeping the demons out of the Imperial Palace was daunting for the Emperor. The mighty reincarnation of 1,000 human psychers with millennia of experience to call upon. Though he was a powerful psyker in his own might, Malcador was still but a mere human. His mental powers nothing compared to that of the Emperor, and this task proved overwhelming, consuming him body and soul in a matter of hours. The siege of Terra lasted for 55 days. Both sides knew that the defeat of the Imperium of Man was near after the defense of the Eternity Gate. Horus knew that he must complete the siege before the arrival of loyalist reinforcements from the other Space Marine legions that were already on their way. So he prepared to teleport to the surface of Terra from his flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, to lead his forces in person. Before this could happen, he was told that the Dark Angels and Space Wolf legions were nearing Terra, and the Ultramarines were only a short distance behind. Horus lowered the void shields of his flagship, and the Emperor of Mankind rose to the challenge, leading members of his elite personal guard, the Legio Custodes, the Primarchs Sanguinius and Rogaldon, and several companies of Imperial Fists and Blood Angels veteran Space Marines in the assault, and teleported aboard the Vengeful Spirit. Horus used his chaotic powers to scatter the Emperor's forces throughout the massive warship when they teleported up through the warp. Each fought a series of battles against the elite forces of chaos aboard the corrupted starship, attempting to link up with their comrades and confront Horus. It was Sanguinius who reached his brother Horus first. The War Master attempted to turn the Blood Angel's Primarch, his oldest and closest friend among the other Primarchs, to chaos one last time. When Sanguinius refused to be corrupted, Horus attacked. Wounded from his many battles on Terra and the terrible battle with the demon Capanda, Sanguinius proved to be no match for Horus, now at the peak of his demonic power after his long alliance with the Chaos Gods. Horus strangled the Angel of Baal, but not before Sanguinius cut a small hole in Horus's Terminator armor. When the Emperor finally entered the throne room of the Vengeful Spirit, he saw the winged corpse of the angelic Sanguinius lying at Horus's feet. Horus hurled bolts of demonic lightning at the Emperor, but the Emperor nullified them with his own immense psychic abilities. The Emperor and Horus engaged one another, a battle that was both physical and psychic in nature. Though the Emperor's psychic gifts and martial skills were unequaled, he found himself unwilling to summon his full strength against his beloved son. The Emperor suffered grievous wounds at Horus's hands, and after a score of thrusts, parries, and counter thrusts between the Emperor Rune Sword and his own lightning claw, Horus sliced open the Emperor's chest armor, then opened his jugular and severed the tendons in his right wrist, disarming the Emperor. A psychic blast seared the flesh from the Emperor's face, destroying one of his eyes. After tearing the Emperor's right arm from its socket, Horus raised his father's broken body high above his head, and broke his back over his knee. At that moment, a lone Legio Custodes warrior entered the bridge. Horus showed the Imperial bodyguard the Emperor's broken form and laughed at the custodian. The valiant Imperial warrior roared and charged the War Master. He was flayed alive by a glancing psychic blast of chaotic power from Horus. Realizing at last that his favored son was truly lost to the corruption of chaos, the Emperor finally gathered his full psychic power in the Immaterium and unleashed a lance of pure warp energy that pierced the gloating Horus's psychic defenses and ripped his body apart. Just before Horus died, he looked his father in the eye, shedding a single tear, begging his father to forgive him for his betrayal. The Emperor saw regret in his fallen son's eyes. The Emperor also knew that the ruinous powers could attempt to possess Horus again, and that he would not be there to stop his son again if they did. Driving all of the near infinite reserves of compassion from his mind for the sake of humanity, the Emperor destroyed Horus utterly. His essence burned from existence in both the physical world and the Immaterium, so that the ruinous powers could not resurrect Horus as a demon prince through their claim on his soul. The destruction of Horus's soul sent a psychic shockwave surging across the solar system, casting the demons of chaos back into the warp and spreading mass panic among the traitor legions and other traitor forces on the surface of Terra in seconds, as the chaos gods found their powers disrupted temporarily by the death of their favored mortal vessel. It became clear to the forces of chaos that their leader had been defeated. A terrible fury, later known as the Black Rage, had encompassed the Blood Angels at the moment of their Primarch's death, and they were surging forth to scatter the attackers. Retreat turned to rout, and rout soon turned to bloodbath. Thousands upon thousands of Chaos Space Marines and Chaos Titans fell attempting to flee. The ground before the Sanctum Imperialis ran red with the blood of traitors and heretics. Meanwhile, the Primarch Rogal Dorn finally found his way to the corrupted starship's bridge, only to discover his falling brother Sanguinius and the shattered body of the Emperor, who was now on the verge of death. His remaining psychic energy spent in the battle with Horus. It was then that the Emperor whispered instructions to Dorn, urging the Imperial Fist's Primarch to take him to the device known as the Golden Throne in the inner sanctum of the Imperial Palace. If there was a chance to save the Emperor's life, Dorn would do what he could. On the Golden Throne, Dorn found Malcador sitting wasted. He was almost dead when the tech priests made the exchange, disengaging Malcador from the strange machine. On the Golden Throne, the Emperor spoke his final words. He urged them to continue the fight to free humanity from the forces of chaos, and then the Master of Mankind spoke no more, his body entombed within the Golden Throne, his spirit caught between the warp and a crippled, decaying body for millennia. The Great Scouring and the Time of Rebirth. As the flames of the civil war subsided across an imperium in which more than 2 trillion humans had died and countless worlds had been utterly shattered, the Ultramarines Primarch Rebirth Guilliman rallied the surviving loyalists, stretching his own legion thin across the galaxy to buy time for the other Space Marine legions to rebuild and rearm, to take the fight to the remaining Chaos Space Marine traitor legions in what became known as the Scouring. Although some traitor legions had fled to the relative safety of the Eye of Terror, the Iron Warriors continued to hold fast to the wars they had conquered, and were dislodged only after decades of grueling warfare. Similarly, the traitors Night Lord's Legion continued the spree of genocide and terror along the eastern fringe of the galaxy. This campaign endured until the Night Lord's Primarch Kenred Kurz was assassinated. Shortly after, Rebirth Guilliman believed that he slew the Alpha Legion's Primarch Alpharius on the planet of Escrador. As the last of the traitor legions fled to the safety of the Eye of Terror at the end of the Great Scouring, Rebirth Guilliman turned his attention to rebuilding the Imperium of Man itself in what became known later as the Time of Rebirth. He took on the supreme military role of Lord Commander of the Imperium and replaced Malcador as the Imperial Regent, the Imperium's day-to-day civil administrator, with the agreement of his remaining Primarch brothers. Guilliman was determined to reshape imperial institutions, so never again would humanity succumb to a heresy so vast or destructive. Guilliman divided the Imperial Army into the separate branches of the Navis Imperialis, Imperial Navy, and the Astra Militarum, Imperial Guard, diluting their ability to mutiny en masse by creating a bureaucratic rivalry between the services. The Inquisition had been founded by Malcador The Sigillite at the instructions of the Emperor in the final days of the heresy. Of all the changes brought upon the Imperium by Robert Guilliman after the heresy, the most pivotal was the second founding of the Space Marines. This reform, enacted 7 standard years after the defeat of Horus, saw the remaining loyalist Space Marine legions broken up into smaller, more flexible 1000 Astartes units known as chapters, thus transforming the Legions Astartes into the Adeptus Astartes. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed this, gained some information. If you did, leave a thumbs up, join the channel if you're not subscribed, and stay tuned for more.